I want to talk a little bit about marriage law in Measure for Measure and how it helps us understand a few key plot points. Both the Mariana plot and why she would ever sleep with Angela after what he treated her, and the Claudio and Juliet plot, in which they are like where Claudio is condemned and to death for having impregnated Juliet before marriage. The thing to remember about both of these plots is that engagement is a much more powerful legal force in Shakespeare's time than it is in ours. Engagement for Shakespeare's generation is a legal contract. For us, you can walk out of an engagement up till um, up till the day of the wedding. That only the wedding is legally binding. Everything up till then is as an intention, is a promise, is between people. You can walk away the morning of your wedding day, right? It's a plot of rom-coms. If anybody, actually, there's that plot point in romantic comedies in Hollywood where someone the preacher says, if anyone knows a reason why these two may not be lawfully joined, um, and the answer is, she doesn't really love him, she loves me, whatever, right? It's the end of various movies. You know that trope. That is not what happens in Shakespeare's period. For Shakespeare and his audience, and for some time after, engagement to be married is itself a legal contract. It's already very legally binding. You can't get out of it. Oh, is that funny? Yeah, it's funny. Ha 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 ha. Legally binding marriage. Legally binding. Ha 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 ha. Yes. Um, so Mariana's problem, Mariana's problem isn't just that Angela has dumped her, but that being engaged to her as a cast-off fiancée, she can't marry anyone else. She's in a legal box where it's Angelo or nobody. This, yes, this. I mean, this was also Hero's problem with that other Claudio back in Much Ado. The other Claudio who we talked about killing, but didn't end up killing. So Mariana takes Angela back. At least she needs to finalize that marriage to move on with her life. The Duke's plan is like, yes, we're going to run the bed trick on that guy. He'll never know. You'll marry him, and once you marry him, I'll kill him, and you'll just inherit all his money. It's funny, right? Measure for measure is funny. Mwah! Mariana's decision that Mariana decides to keep him when she could just be his very wealthy widow is a personal decision, is an emotional decision. But the decision to marry that guy badly as he's treated her is her only legal option, except for a life of spinsterhood. She can't now she's so because she's legally contracted to this man, she has to marry this man. I know it seems odd. Um, that thing that you see in the movies, the thing from the English Book of Common Prayer, where the preacher says, if anyone knows any reason why these two may not be lawfully joined, is in part about that kind of contract. It's not the moment to stand up and say, no, she doesn't really love him. It's the moment to stand up and say, he has another wife who he keeps hidden in the attic, for example, to pick a non-Shakespeare example. It's the moment to say, no, he is engaged to me. He promised me we have a contract. He can't marry someone else because we're already engaged, right? Or to say, hey, there's a kind of. That's why the rest of the formula is speak now or forever hold your peace. That formula says if anybody knows a reason why this person is engaged with somebody else, and you're here, you tell us right now. Don't come back and ask for to annul this marriage later. If you know a reason these people should not get legally married, now's the time. It's not about options; it's about legalities. And now it's just pro forma because we don't view engagement as legally binding anymore. It's now a personal promise. It's not a contract. The fact that for Shakespeare's generation it is a legally binding contract also explains why Claudio and Juliet have gotten into the mess they've gotten into. Why were they sleeping together before marriage? Well, they were already engaged. And if that seems like a kind of gray area for us, it's a much less gray area when you can't actually back out of engagement without mutual, like you both need to release the other. Um, it is actually turns out to have been typical in Shakespeare's England for people who are engaged to stay engaged for a long time and actually be sleeping together and having sex during that period. Before they were 100% married, sometimes the consummation happened weeks or months before the wedding ceremony, the religious wedding ceremony, and this was okay. This was a kind of standard village behavior, especially in villages, and like also in cities. And like because you're already kind of like 80% married, right? The person you're sleeping with can't just walk out on you. They're legally bound to you. So sleeping together and maybe you get pregnant is not such a disaster. One such happy couple are, of course, our friend William Shakespeare of Warwickshire and his somewhat older neighbor, Miss Anne Hathaway Shakespeare. These two people were engaged and then had sex and then got pregnant and then got married. How do we know this? We have some basic records, including their marriage license and the baptism of their first child, their first daughter's birth. And we can do very simple math. William Shakespeare and his bride, Anne Hathaway Shakespeare, get a marriage license at the end of November. It's almost their anniversary. Sometime right before you actually couldn't get married during the season that runs up to Christmas during Advent. So they really had to get married before December got started because after Christmas, oh, it was going to be embarrassing how pregnant Anne was. They get a and 5 months after they're married, they have a lovely daughter. Even English majors can do that math. So this thing for which Claudio has been sentenced to death is something that Shakespeare, we know the historical Shakespeare, the writer, had done himself. He clearly does not view it as a capital offense, as a crime for which one would be executed. And I don't think any of his audience would think of it that way either. It is clearly an extreme and rigid and insane position. Sentencing this young man to death is a massive, crazy overreaction, and that's how the audience would take it. Remember, the person out to solve this problem, as I said in my introductory video, is the person who caused it. This crazy overreaction is not just Angelo's fault, though it is Angelo's fault, but it's primarily the Duke's fault. It's the Duke who's insisting on enforcing these crazy, impractical laws.